How's it going, YouTubers? It's been a couple weeks or so since the last Abel the LMTV build update, because I've been waiting on this wiring harness that came from Turkey, Istanbul, in fact. So I was basically waiting on this wiring harness, which has pigtails and the correct connectors for all of the items needed to power the Eberspacher Hydronic heater. So my goal for today is to get this set up and test it, bench test it, to prove to you guys that you can take a GM Eberspacher, which has this wiring harness on it. Sorry, that's the wrong one. This wiring harness on it, and you see the yellow and the black wires. That's because GM decided to tie the ECU of this hydronic heater into the ECU on the vehicle. So if the correct parameters are not met, the temperature outside has to be less than 39 degrees, your parking brake has to be on, and you have to be at an altitude of less than 4,500 feet. If those parameters are not met, then this heater and the ECU will not turn itself on. So, to alleviate that problem, I did some research, and I still don't know if this is going to work 100%, but I'm just going out on a limb and taking a risk. I got this diesel heater on eBay for about 155 bucks shipped. So, with that being said, this is a replacement ECU that should theoretically bolt right onto there. And the wiring harnesses match up except for one thing, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So this is a D5WS ECU. All of the components are the same except for one thing. And so if you look here at the wiring diagrams, let's see if I can set them side by side so you can kind of see. So right here you have a D5WZ wiring diagram. And then if you go over here to the same section, this is the actual inside of the ECU, you'll notice that there's a couple more components included on the D5WSC. So one of the main ones is, you see 2.12, and it's not included on here. So 2.12, if you go down to the legend, and we'll look through the list here, find 2.12 is the water pump. So this coolant pump, which is normally controlled by the ECU on the GM Eberspacher, well, it's actually not controlled. It's controlled by the ECU on the vehicle for the GM version, which is why you don't see it tied into the ECU here, the D5WZ. So basically what I have to do is I have to run a pigtail out of the ECU, and it appears to be on pins 10 and 11 to cycle the coolant pump when the heater turns on. So that appears to be the major difference. What else is on here that's a little bit different? 2.2, that is the dosing pump, I believe. So the ECU controls both. You got a 2.2 Let's see here. Yeah, 2.2 is the fuel dosing pump. And deciphering this harness, I believe that right there, that little tiny plug right there, goes to the dosing pump, because the plugs actually match up. So I'm going to do some deciphering on this wiring harness and a little bit of testing, and I'm going to get a bench test set up and show you guys that this thing actually functions. I'm going to have a tub of water here. I'm going to try and find a thermometer, a probe thermometer that I can use to show you guys that the temperature's going up, and this thing functions 100%. The first thing I'm going to do is remove that ECU, put this ECU on, run a pigtail out for the coolant pump, and then we'll go from there. So let's see how that goes. Alright guys, I got the old ECU off, and the plugs do match up, and my guess was correct. So I don't know if you're able to see this. You see the little numbers there? See pins 10 and 11? That corresponds to that coolant pump that we need to get hooked up. Looks like 11 is the positive and 10 is the negative going to that guy. So if you correlate it to the plug going in, let's see if I can point to this with a screwdriver. Okay, that's pretty good. That right there is 11, and there's a pin missing, and this right here is 10. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through I have a wiring harness out of an 05 STI from when I did my build on my Baja. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the wiring harnesses and see if I have anything that will fit in these, that will actually make connection with pins 10 and 11 in the ECU, because then the ECU can control the coolant pump. So let me go dig through there and see if I can come up with anything that's going to work for this. Alright guys, I found this connector with 2 pins on it and wires that appear to be the appropriate size for that pump. So I'm going to take this connector apart and see if they slide over pins 10 and 11, and if that is the case, I'm going to insert them into this wiring harness, create a pigtail that comes out of the little rubber connector here, and that'll be a done deal for getting wiring going to the coolant pump. Alright guys, I was able to get those 2 plugs in there. I had to drill a small little hole to accommodate the larger size wire that's going to connect to those pins, but I was able to get that in there and get it connected. Seems like there's continuity on everything. I'm going to bolt this back together. I got to drill like a little hole here and put a wiring grommet for these wires to come out, and then we'll keep moving forward to the testing phase. Alright guys, I got a little bench test set up. I've been sitting here for the last couple hours going through the wiring diagrams, and this is supposed to go to a controller. So for me, it's going to go, one of these wires is going to go to the thermostat when the temperature drops, and it sends a signal to the Eberspacher. The problem is I can't figure out if it's, I know the brown is ground and the red is power to go to the controller, so I have those taped off, but then there's 3 chances here to get this right. It's either the black, the yellow, or the blue that sends a signal to the ECU to start up. Now I got everything else hooked up, but like I said, I'm unsure of, I want to say it's the yellow. That's kind of going to be my guess, that if you send 12 volts through this yellow, that's the signal it needs. The other thing that I'm concerned about is with this ECU, you only have 10 chances before it locks up and it won't start at all. So if you screw up the startup sequence, like I said, you only have 10 chances, so you got to be really careful with what you're doing. Aside from that, I think I have everything else hooked up correctly. I've got the transformer sitting out here ready to plug in, and I want to do a bench test, but we'll see how it goes here. Alright guys, I had to take the Eberspacher apart one more time. I forgot that the diesel version has pins 7 and 8 that control the dosing pump from inside here. So pins 7 and 8, there's actually nothing in the D5WSC, so I had to add 2 more wires to pins 7 and 8, and then I'll get those coming out here and make up a pigtail for the dosing pump, and then we'll test it again. Alright guys, I want to show you what I was talking about there. I did get that fuel pump wired into the ECU. So if you look at the diagram here, this 2.2 is the dosing pump, and it's got an H next to it. So 2.2 is the dosing pump. Go down to H, diesel only. If you look at the diagram here, I thought you could run it externally without the ECU controlling it, but on this one you can't. So if you look at G says petrol only, so the gasoline version has the one that's outside the ECU, but the ECU definitely wants to control the dosing pump, and it's gender neutrality on this, so it doesn't matter positive or minus. Let's see if this is even going to start up now that I got everything hooked up and it's ready to test. I don't have a thermometer, but I'm assuming we could see steam coming off of the coolant if this thing actually works. I'm going to hook up a gauge here, and then so I can see the voltage coming off of the transformer, make sure we're getting enough voltage so that's not another problem, and then I'll start it up. Moved it indoors here. That jumper that I was using was giving me some finicky voltage, so let's see if hooking it up to the Baja's batteries works better. Never had one of these before, so I don't know how long it takes to get started. Oh, looks like there's a exhaust coming out. I hear the dosing pump. Could this be it? Is it working? Oh yeah! This is awesome. I'll just tell you guys with my finger if the water is getting warm or not. Listen to it go. That's awesome. Oh yes. kind of warm. Holy shit, now it's getting warm. Getting warmer. Getting warmer. I guess yellow was the correct wire to use for the signal, so I know that now. Yeah, that's getting really hot. Yeah, it's almost, I can't keep my hand in it anymore. So yeah, the ECU for this was $250 shipped off of heatso.com. And then I just had to do some figuring with the wire harness. Had to put 4 more wires into the DW5Z harness. And now we've got a DW5SC that's working. The GM Eberspachers, you can find them on eBay. They're super cheap because nobody's ever figured out how to get one running unless they know CAN bus. So this thing is just, I wonder how hot the actual body of the, oh, it's just warm. I'm assuming since the coolant's going through there that it keeps the body of the actual stove at a reasonable temperature and it doesn't cook all the wiring and the ECU and everything. Yeah, that's above comfort to keep your finger in there. It's like we got some good voltage going. This is awesome. I'm so stoked. So like the total cost for all this was like less than $600 and a few spare parts sitting around, and now I just have to tie it into Abel. We'll have a hydronic heating system. See how the ECU is controlling the flow of the coolant? It's speeding it up and slowing it down as it goes. It's regulating its own temperature. The dosing pump is pulling up diesel as it needs it. It's so awesome. Oh yeah, the tub of water is, jeez, almost untouchable. It's got to be 85 degrees or so. It is getting warm. So awesome. Oh, I'm so stoked that this worked. I did this on a whim, thinking that if I can get this to work, everybody that's ever bought one of these and given up on it because of the CAN bus on the old ECU can actually put it to use now. So I am super excited that this actually worked out, and I spent time looking through the wiring diagrams and everything. I'm gonna let this keep running, but I will. I'm gonna stop the camera and I'll come back when it goes into its sustaining mode. Okay, it went into maintenance mode when I took the signal wire off of 12 volts. So now I think it just goes into low mode and just maintains. But let's see what happens when I put 12 volts back on this. might have a timeout in the ECU where okay, there, I hooked it back up. Let's see what it does now that it's receiving a call to increase the temperature. See if it goes back into high mode. Yeah, that water is freaking hot. Just about burnt my finger there. So it looks like it's in low mode, and I don't know if there's a timeout. I'll come back when it starts to ramp itself back up, and I'll let you know how long it took. Okay, it looks like it went back into high mode. It took about 2 minutes from the time I hooked it back up to the signal wire to when it started ramping back up. It's like the battery's receiving a draw from it. I bet you that's the glow plug. Yeah, it just restarts the fire and everything. So it just goes through its whole cycle. It shuts down and then it restarts the fire in the little oven. And I have to be right that the glow plug is creating a huge draw on the battery like that when it starts up. Because normally it sits at 12.6, 12.5. And then I think it'll back off once there's a fire burning in there. Let's keep an eye on the voltage here and see when it backs off. Sounds like a jet or a turbo. Like the glow plug backed off. It's like it's in high mode again. Alright guys, this video's been pretty long. It's probably the longest one in the series, so I'm going to separate this one from the install video since the install will be a little lengthy as well. So I'm going to catch you guys next time. I'll see you later. Bye bye.